Welcome to NCIX Tech Tips. Today I'm going to start the episode by answering the two most obvious questions. First of all, yes, AMD's Phenom 2 X6 processor, this is a 6-core processor, is a great overclocker, and it's really, really easy. Question number 2 is, why is the NCIX Tech Tips set so ghetto now? Well, the reason is that we've been hit pretty hard by the economic crisis, so if you'd like to contribute to NCIX Tech Tips, please drop some change in the Hobo Change Cup, or alternately you can subscribe, because subscribers equals question mark somehow turns into profit. Anyway, if you're actually seriously wanting to know how to overclock your brand new Phenom 2 X6 processor, stay tuned. We're going to give you the step-by-step instructions. So along with their new 6-core processors, AMD has been rolling out some new chipsets. So they're replacing all of the 700 series with 800 series. That means we're going to have an 870, an 880G, an 890GX, and an 890FX right up there at the top end. So ASUS has made it possible for us to get our hands on an 890GX board. This is a performance board. It's their M4A89 GTD Pro USB 3. It's got support for SATA 6 gigabit per second. USB 3, it uses their Extreme Design platform. And there's also a bunch of other features of this board that are very unique. If you want to check it out, you can see my full unboxing and product overview of this board that I did a little while back by clicking here, as long as the cameraman remembers to put in the annotation. Anyway, I'd also like to say, besides a big thanks to ASUS for getting us this board, big thanks to their engineers for making it so easy to get the most out of this chip. I'm going to spoil the surprise a little bit here, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, we got this up to 4 gigahertz pretty much effortlessly. It took about 5-10 minutes, and obviously it takes a little bit longer to run all the stability tests and make sure it's running okay, but like I said, to actually put the settings in place, about 5-10 minutes. So we're going to do today's overclocking guide a little bit backwards, and I'm going to start with showing you the stable overclock at 4 gigahertz up here on the TV screen. So I've got Prime running on 6 threads here, and it's been running for, well, why don't we stop it and find out how long it's been running. It's been running for 3 hours with no problems, and at only about 50 degrees on the CPU using this Noctua cooler. So now we're going to go backwards and get back into the BIOS and show you just how we achieved that setting. So the first thing we do is we press delete when we're starting up to get into the BIOS of the motherboard here, and then we navigate right over to AI Tweaker. AI Tweaker is where ASUS stores all of their overclocking settings. So the first one we run into is the OC Tuner utility. We won't be using that today because we're going to be manually overclocking this particular CPU. Next we get down to the AI Overclock Tuner, and this is either set to auto or manual. I've set it to manual so that I can get access to the CPU ratio as well as the CPU bus frequency settings. I've set this to 14. Now, a quick note about the CPU ratio. The CPU ratio times the CPU bus frequency, that's what gives you your clock speed. So if you multiply these two numbers together, you're going to end up with approximately 4 gigahertz, which is what we aimed for today. Now, I'm using the 1055T. That means that I have what's called a locked multiplier. I can only set this multiplier to 14 for all 6 cores, or I can set it up to 16.5 when we're using AMD Turbo Core technology. So AMD Turbo Core, which I've disabled because I want all 6 cores running at 4 gigahertz all the time, and it makes the overclocking a little bit simpler, but you can leave it on. AMD Turbo Core technology enables 3 of the cores to boost up to this higher multiplier when you're only taking advantage of 3 cores or less. If you have a highly threaded application like video editing or 3D rendering, then the AMD Turbo Core technology will not enable, and it'll stay with 6 cores at your lower multiplier, which is 14. So I've stuck with 14 just to keep things a little bit simpler for myself, and then my target was about 4 gigahertz. So all I had to do was take this from the stock 200, and you can see that BIOSes have gotten so much more advanced in the last few years. ASUS actually calculates for you right up here. As soon as you turn up your bus frequency, it tells you what it's going to mean in terms of CPU and in terms of RAM. I'm using DDR3 1600 megahertz RAM, so I didn't want to go over that because when you're doing especially your stability testing, you don't want to take more than one thing outside of stock parameters at a time to make sure that you know what's causing instability if you run into it. So I set that to 286. I left the PCIe frequency at 100. Now this seems like a weird frequency to have set for my RAM, but what that actually works out to, if I take the CPU frequency back down to 200, is 1066. So I'm running what's called a divider. If you set it to 1600, Yeah, okay. If you set it to 1600 and then you increase the frequency, you can see very soon I'm going to be running my RAM way outside of regular settings. So I've got it back to my 4 gigahertz now, and I'm running my RAM at 2.2 gigahertz. I don't think it's realistic for this particular set, so I'm back down to where I was. I've left everything else on auto because I was just doing a quick test to see how well ASUS handles it with auto settings. Turns out it's great. And then down here, the only other things I had to adjust were 1.65 volts for my memory. That's the default voltage. And then I also set my CPU to 1.45 volts. And that pretty much covers it. And all you have to do is press F10 to reset, and you're booted right into Windows at 4 gigahertz. So the kicker today is the price. There are 2 6-core processors in front of me, and both of them cost less than $350. Actually, the Phenom 2 X6 1055T for turbo costs less than $250. It's clocked at 2.8 gigahertz. You get 6 cores, and then the T, like I said, you can also, I don't know if you can read this or not, but this guy goes up to 3.3 gigahertz in turbo, or if you're overclocking it, obviously it goes up to 4 gigahertz, because that's what we did today. Now, if the overclocking that we went through looks like too much work, you can also go with a Black Edition. AMD's Black Edition processors still under $350, and it features an unlocked multiplier, and it's faster to boot. So this is a 3.2 gigahertz processor that goes up to 3.6 in turbo mode with only 3 cores active, and then it also gives you that ease. Unlike Intel's 6-core unlocked processor, it costs, well, a third of the price, and although you don't get quite the same performance, it's a great value and it's easier to overclock. All you do is change the multiplier, turn it up, and then you can turn up your CPU voltage a little bit to offset the stability you might run into if you turn up the speed. So let's talk a little bit today about our setup that we used. This is, like I said before, we already covered the motherboard, but we're also using a pretty cool graphics card and cooler here today. This is an AMD Radeon iFinity 6 5870 2 gig graphics card. So I did an unboxing. I've done a few videos about this one, and then it's got a Spitfire 6 cooler on it. So then on the CPU, I've actually got, let's go around to the other side. Sorry about this. I've got a Noctua NH-D14. This uses a 140 millimeter fan. It's got a couple of towers, and even at 4 gigahertz, I never saw temperatures over 52 degrees on this 6-core processor. So this thing has impressed the heck out of me today, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the graphics card and the cooling so that if you're trying to put together a similar setup to what we're using today, you will be able to. So thanks for checking out our NCIX tech tips on overclocking AMD's brand new Phenom 2 X6.